You can't see them. The periscope's cracked. Outside is white glare and dust and heat that turns the horizon into a lie. But you can hear them. Every few seconds, another impact. Another round hitting the hull and going nowhere. The whole tank rings like a cathedral bell each time. You feel it in your back teeth, in your chest, in the floor under your boots. You've been hit 31 times. 31. Not one of those rounds came through. Here's what you know right now. Engine seized, radio dead, temperature inside climbing past 50 degrees Celsius, 122 Fahrenheit. They've sent for the 88, the one gun that changes everything. The one gun in this desert that doesn't just bounce off this armor like every other one has been doing for the last 2 hours. And it's coming. Your driver is watching you. You know, your gunner's watching you. Nobody is saying the word that is filling up all the air in this compartment. Leave. You have maybe 20 minutes before that 88 gets into position, and the math changes permanently. You have 17 rounds left for a gun that still works. And somewhere behind you, 13 kilometers, just over 8 miles, back through open desert, a British column is moving with no idea that the only thing standing between them and a German regiment is this tank. Your tank. You. So, do you stay? Because Sergeant Jack Maclean did. May 15th, 1941. North Africa. One Matilda II tank. 3 men. An engine already dying when the day started. By the time it ended, 79 hits on the armor. Not one came through the main armor. And those hours would stall an entire Panzer regiment, or redirect a British column that never knew it was being saved, and end up in Rommel's personal files as an engagement he could not explain. This is what happened inside T-4758, and why it still matters. The Matilda II was not supposed to be here. Not in North Africa. Not in a war that had already outgrown it. Built in the late 1930s for trenches that never came. Slow, heavy, designed around one idea the British Army held on to longer than was probably wise. If it cannot be killed, it doesn't need to be fast. For a specific window of this war, a window already closing in May 1941, that idea was exactly right. 78 millimeters of hardened steel, just over 3 inches, on the front, curved, angled in a way that didn't just stop incoming rounds, but redirected them. Made them someone else's problem. The sides, 70 millimeters, just under 3 inches. The whole hull a compound shape that made the effective thickness higher than the numbers alone suggested. The standard German anti-tank gun in 1941, the 37mm Pak 36, could punch through 36 millimeters, about 1.5 inches, of vertical plate at combat range. 36 against 78. German crews had a name for it. The Klopfgerät, the army door knocker. Because that's all it did against a Matilda. Knock and announce that you were there. Nothing more. You want to know something almost darkly funny about that? The Germans knew this going in, knowing they'd learned it a full year earlier at a small French town called Arras, May 1940, where 16 Matilda IIs tore through Rommel's division, and his anti-tank crews fired and watched their shells spark off British armor like rain off a tin roof. Rommel was there personally. He watched it happen. He had to drag 88mm anti-aircraft guns, 3.5 inches of shell, into direct fire positions. Weapons designed to shoot down aircraft, because nothing else he had could touch these tanks. He stopped the British that day. But the memory of Arras sat in his planning, like a splinter he couldn't reach. Always there, always shaping what came next. The 88 worked. But it was slow, heavy, difficult to reposition in desert sand, and there were never enough of them, when every gun redirected toward a Matilda meant delay somewhere else, a gap in air defense, a stalled column, a timetable that didn't hold. That's not a solution. That's a workaround. And workarounds shape wars in ways that direct confrontation doesn't. Every delay caused by one of these tanks was a delay in the operational tempo Rommel's entire approach depended on. One tank type, one specific problem, already reshaping how Germany fought in this desert before today even started. T-4758 rolled out at 0520 hours. 3 men. Maclean commanding. Trooper Raymond Ellis on the gun. 22 years old, 9 months of desert experience. The kind of gunner who'd learned to read heat shimmer the way a sniper reads wind. Trooper Peter Waugh driving quiet, precise. The man who'd kept this specific machine running through mechanical failures that should have stopped it 3 times in the previous month. They knew each other the way you only know someone when there's no privacy and no escape. Completely, without sentiment. The engine started overheating 40 minutes into the advance, oil pressure dropping. Waugh reported it twice. Maclean said, "Keep moving." They reached point 206, a low ridgeline controlling sightlines for 15 kilometers, just over 9 miles in every direction, at 0847 hours. Empty ground. Rock and sand and silence. Maclean called in their position. The radio didn't answer. Desert sand in the contacts, heat warping the tubes. It happened out here. You noted the fault, logged the time, and dealt with what was in front of you. He climbed out with his binoculars. That's when he saw the dust. North-northwest, bearing 320, 4,000 meters, 2.5 miles, and closing fast, and not slowing down. Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, half-tracks. A full regiment's worth of armor, moving hard and direct toward the approach the British main column would use in approximately 2 hours. You already know what that means. You were just sitting in the tank thinking about it. If that regiment reaches the staging area before the British get through, the entire British force, spread across 80 kilometers of desert, 50 miles, coordination already breaking down, gets hit in the open. No cover, no warning. Not a battle, a slaughter. T-4758 was the only thing that could stop it. Maclean dropped back into the turret. "We hold here." Ellis, without a word, loaded the first round. Waugh kept the engine running. Oil pressure dropping, temperature gauge past the line it wasn't supposed to cross. 17 rounds between them and 50 German tanks. The first German vehicle crested the rise at 0904 hours. A Panzer III, advanced scout, moving cautious. Ellis put a round through its track at 1,100 meters, just over 1,200 yards. Clean hit. The tank slewed sideways and stopped. The crew bailed into the sand. The column behind it stopped, fanned out. Textbook response. They'd spotted the Matilda now. One British tank, hull down behind a low berm, alone on a ridgeline in open desert. One tank. The German company commander must have looked at it and thought, this takes 4 minutes. 3 Panzer IIIs opened fire from 1,400 meters, just over 1,500 yards. First round, glacis plate, sparked, deflected high into the sky. Second, turret side. Paint stripped away in a white-hot flash. The armor rang, held. Third, into the berm in front. Dirt exploded. Shrapnel scattered off the hull like gravel off a barn wall. Inside T-4758, each impact was a hammer blow felt through the entire frame. Through the floor, the seats, the hands on the controls. Temperature in the compartment climbing past 45 degrees Celsius. 113 Fahrenheit. Cordite smoke from the gun had nowhere to go. Ellis fired back, hit a second Panzer III. It shuddered, slowed, started smoking from the engine deck. More tanks moved up. The ridge around T-4758 became a continuous eruption of sand and fire, rounds hitting every few seconds. The armor kept holding. Every round that bounced confirmed what German commanders already feared. Their standard weapons were useless here. And useless weapons don't just fail tactically, they fail psychologically. The crews knew it, their commanders knew it. That knowledge compressed into the radio traffic going up the chain. adding urgency and confusion to a regiment that should have been moving. Because those guns were failing so visibly, the Germans couldn't simply push forward and accept losses. They had to stop, regroup, find a different answer. And every minute spent finding that answer was a minute the British column behind Maclean was still moving unmolested through the desert. The Germans brought up 75mm captured French artillery, just under 3 inches of shell. Faint high explosive rounds not designed to penetrate armor but to concuss, to shake the crew loose, to start fires through the engine vents. The first shell hit the turret ring and shifted the whole tank sideways. 27 tons, nearly 30 US tons. Moved by concussion alone, the gun mantlet jammed. Ellis cranked it manually, 30 grinding seconds of muscle-burning traverse to get back on target. He fired anyway. Waugh's voice as calm as a man reading a fuel gauge. Engine's done. 20 minutes, maybe. Maclean didn't answer. There was nothing to say that the situation hadn't already said. At 10:38 hours, a command vehicle appeared to the west. It stopped at the German forward position. A figure dismounted and raised binoculars toward the ridge. Rommel. He glassed .206, 1 Matilda. Still there, and smoke pouring from the engine deck, not moving. Guns still traversing. He said something to his staff. Nobody recorded what. Then he turned and pointed west, toward the 88. 40 minutes to get it forward and into position. The sand didn't cooperate. The towing vehicle threw a track during repositioning. The crew worked in heat already past 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit. 40 minutes of an entire Panzer regiment standing completely still. In mobile desert warfare, in the operational tempo Rommel had built his entire reputation on. 40 minutes was the difference between catching a retreating column and watching it disappear. Between a decisive engagement and a missed opportunity that would take weeks to recreate. 3 men in a broken tank had decided the math didn't apply to them. Now inside T-4758. By this point, engine seized, radio dead, temperature past 50 degrees Celsius, 122 Fahrenheit, 14 rounds fired, 3 remaining. 3. Nobody was talking about leaving. At 11:07 hours, before the 88 fired a single round, Maclean made the call. Bottom hatch, now. Move low. They went out through the floor of the tank, into a drainage cut 40 meters east, about 44 yards, and disappeared into the desert. The 88 fired at 11:19 hours. First round, missed high. Second round, hit the turret dead center, penetrated, went through the crew compartment and out the back plate. Nobody was inside. 3 men. No water left. 13 kilometers, just over 8 miles, from friendly lines. They walked for 2 days, and here's what happened while they walked. Completely unaware of what those hours had purchased, the British column behind them kept moving. An entire German regiment had spent the last 90 minutes fixated on one ridge, trying to kill one tank that wouldn't die. While that regiment stood still, a British reconnaissance carrier spotted them, radioed back, and the column diverted east, slipped through the gap the stalled Germans had left wide open, reached the staging area without a single engagement. By the time Rommel understood what had happened, that he'd committed a full regiment to destroying one tank while the actual British force went around him, it was done. The column was through. And here's what that meant beyond one morning in the desert. Tobruk held for 241 days. And the siege forced Germany to commit resources it couldn't afford, stretched supply lines that were already breaking, and bought time the British used to reinforce Egypt. Time that made El Alamein possible. Time that made everything that came after El Alamein possible. You cannot draw a straight line from one tank on one ridge to the end of the war in North Africa. History doesn't work in straight lines. But you can draw a line from T-4758 to a column that got through. From that column to a perimeter that held. From that perimeter to 241 days that cost Germany more than it could pay. And from those 241 days to a battlefield where the tide finally permanently turned. Some battles are lost and still matter. Some tanks are destroyed and still win. No Patterson, a Royal Army Ordnance Corps engineer, counted the hits when British forces briefly retook the area 4 days later. His report is in the National Archives. I've read it. 79 hits, counted and cataloged. Not one penetrated the main armor, not until the 88. And by then, it didn't matter. Maclean survived the war, went home to Edinburgh, worked as a mechanic, died in 1983. He didn't talk much about the war. When he did, he didn't talk about this day. Raymond Ellis, the gunner who cranked a jammed turret by hand in 50-degree heat and kept firing, was killed at El Alamein in October 1942. Different tank, different day. He was 23 years old. Peter Waugh made it home. Passed in 1991. T-4758 was scrapped, melted down, turned into something else. The photographs survived. The tank's still on that ridge, yet pockmarked and scorched and intact, still there, still exactly where they left it. And in a British interrogation report from 2 weeks after the battle, there's one line from a captured German tanker. 5th Panzer, taken near Sollum. The interrogator asked about morale after point 206. The prisoner said, "We learned that some tanks don't die when you kill them." He wasn't talking about the armor. Most wartime reports reduce moments like this to a single line. Tank destroyed, advance delayed. But inside that line were 3 men sitting in 50-degree heat, listening to shells bounce off armor, holding a ridge nobody told them to die on, for a column that never knew they were there. That's the kind of history this channel is built for. If your family has a connection to the Western Desert, Royal Tank Regiment, Africa Corps, any uniform at all, drop it in the comments. I read every one. These men deserve more than a file number in an archive. And if you want more stories where one decision changes far more than anyone realized at the time, subscribe. There's another one next week. I'll see you there.